So my new classes are coming to D&D. So D&D 5th edition just had their big update over this last year. So I'm transitioning the Luchador, which was released a few years ago. Now with the update, the Luchador needed some changes because they altered and changed how unarmed strikes work. I want to address and smooth out the play experience that I had while I personally played the Luchador in a campaign of mine, while also feedback from others who have bought the Luchador and also had concerns with how the class played and wanted to smooth out its gameplay loop. I recently ran a playtest to playtest both classes plus a new class that I am currently in development in. We can just see if it works with the new updated rules for the edition. Also to get it really to nail down what these classes are meant to do. In the playtest, I had 3 goals. The first is, can my players understand what I wrote? Was it confusing? Was it understandable? Did it enable its intended use? Or was it too limiting in the way it was written, not allowing it to do more? I think one of the things that whenever you're writing and you kind of can get into a bubble as a designer, you have an intent and you have an understanding of what you're writing, but as soon as you put it into the other hands of somebody else, they may interpret things differently or look at what you wrote and it does something that was unintended, but a person interprets it and sees that there's multiple things you can do. So either if it does something that's unintended, well, you can go back, write it to clear it up so it doesn't do the thing that didn't intend it to do, or leave it there because it does something, it adds an extra layer to the gameplay loop. So that is what I wanted to do when it came to the wording of the classes and their features. The second playtest goal I wanted to achieve was to see if the core mechanics and the gameplay loop of the classes work. I wanted to see if the core mechanics, their core kit, and the gameplay loop that I intended players to use with these 2 classes were fun. They were fun for the player, fun for the table, and they didn't disrupt the table experience. They didn't make it hard for me to run against. I didn't feel as a DM that I was being suppressed by and not allowed to also have fun at the table. Mainly, these 2 classes deal with certain aspects of the game that aren't necessarily highlighted. Also, having players take those actions, does it disrupt the play of the other players and they're not allowed to have fun either, because are those mechanics that enable that play style too oppressive where players aren't allowed to actually play because all the time is being hogged up by the Scourge or the Luchador. The last goal, I wanted to see if the classes feel balanced compared to the official classes in the game. I think there's a variety of ways of actually testing balance and actually testing the math. I'm not a math guy. I've never been a math guy. I rely on other people, collaborators. Shout out to JP, the editor. He's been crunching numbers for both the Scourge and the Luchador to make sure that mathematically they are balanced or competitive with the core classes. Even on the math side, if the math dictates, yes, they're balanced, in actual play experience, they may or may not feel balanced because they might feel oppressive even if they're doing average damage compared to other classes. Or even if they're not doing enough damage, they still might feel balanced compared to other classes because at least to the play experience, they feel competitive. In order to achieve my goals, I needed to form a session that allowed me to enable the gameplay I wanted feedback from. I needed to run something that was more combat centric. Also, I wanted to focus on the core class kit itself. So I needed to stick within the at least tier 1 to play. So I opted to run the Axe Home adventure found in the Essentials kit. It is primarily a combat arena disguised as a dungeon. Axe Home itself, who was in my party? What did the party makeup consist of for this playtest? We had a Tooth and Claw Luchador. Next, we also had the Black Order Scourge player. Another buddy of mine playtested a new class that is currently in development, which is the Puppeteer. My cousin, he ended up playing a Celestial Warlock. And then another buddy of mine, he played a Peace Domain Cleric. Some spoilers, if you end up playing in the Essentials kit adventures, the Axe Home adventure had the party investigate and clear out an abandoned dwarven stronghold that had been overrun by undead. Like I said, most of the rooms are really empty. The encounters in this adventure are combat. It is a combat heavy. To be honest, for everything that my players interacted with, it was just a combat session. Most of the enemies that players were facing were ghouls, and then eventually the last fight was going to be a boss fight with a banshee. The adventure itself has a lot of alternate paths for the players to kind of navigate through the dungeon to kind of control how many enemies that they're facing. My players bumbled their ass through it, made some loud noises, and ended up having all the enemies form into a single room that they were going to fight outside of the Banshee. The fights with the ghouls, since there were so many of them, allowed the party to kind of showcase their core abilities. And while the boss fight really highlighted how the Luchador and the Scourge can function when an enemy is immune or resistant to their damage and status conditions they can inflict. Especially since the Luchador and the Scourge heavily rely on implementing certain status conditions. So obviously Luchador is grapple and prone. The Scourge is all about implementing fear, or the frightened condition. So, and the Banshee is 100% immune to all three of those things, and is also resistant to their damage types. How did I decide on Luchador's hit die? That class needed to be a D10. There's no way around it. If it's going to be a heavily martial class that you expect it to be in the fight, it needs to be a D10. I think there are some cases to go D12, but for the most part, if you're going to design a class option that is intended to be a frontline martial, and that is really the big thing. It is meant to sit on the front line. It needs enough hit points to be able to like be in the mix of the fight so that it could actually survive and tank hits. Okay, so let's jump into the playtest results themselves. So we're gonna start off with talking about the Luchador, then we'll get into the Scourge, and then we're gonna talk about what comes after. Luchador playtest results. There was a significant amount of changes to its core class kit compared from the 2014 version of the class until now. If you guys want to see those things, there's a free download up on the Patreon. There's also a thread in the Discord where you can get access to the playtest version of this class. Unlike the official classes in 5th edition, the Luchador doesn't have a traditional resource management system. So instead, the Luchador generates resources by making unarmed strikes. So that means whenever it does an attack with no weapons or grapples or shoves, you generate a resources which is called Luchadai. You then spend Luchadai to perform signature moves, which are soft spell-like martial abilities inspired by professional wrestling moves. So what we found as an issue with the 2014 version of the class is that signature moves, since they acted as a rider effect to unarmed strikes, this resulted in signature moves generating Luchadai, and then you having to subtract from that pool at the same time. So you would add and then subtract, which ultimately slowed things down. So say you needed to spend 3 Luchadai on a signature move. You do a signature move, it gains you 2 Luchadai, so you'd have to do this weird dance of like, okay, well, I only gain 1 because I'm spending 2 here. With the intention of you comboing those signature moves together, it became where I'm adding, I need to spend 3, but then I gain 2, so here's 1, and then I spend that other 1 to do, because I need to spend 2 to do this other move, but then I gain 2. So they did this weird dance where you just like slowed gameplay down. So in order to make this change, signature moves were changed to use your attack action and now act as a replacement for your unarmed strikes. No longer are they a rider effect. They are a whole separate ability that you have to use. So there's no real way for you to gain Luchadai off of it. There are some rare circumstances that a signature move will call for you to ask an unarmed strike, but the way it's written, you still, even if it asks you to make an unarmed strike, you do not generate Luchadai for doing that ability. Also, I removed the reaction-based duro feature. It was in large part to address damage mitigation scaling concerns with the class, and also my vision on how Luchadai should be used. There is a new duro feature now, which is a static ability that grants the Luchador a resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from any creature that's smaller than its current Lucha size. So now it's kind of just the static ability that is always there. You're not going to be spending any Luchadai on a single reaction to try to just mitigate damage. There was issues with scaling. At lower levels, it removed too much damage, and at higher levels, it didn't protect you from enough damage. This just having it now a static ability while you could focus on just using your Luchadai for your signature moves eased up gameplay. So and also left your reaction open to other features either in subclasses, or if you have other stuff in other player options that you have access to, you can do that. Or if you want to make an opportunity attack, boom, you're like it's there. I did mention Lucha size. Lucha size is something that's codified new for this update. So in the 2014 version of the class, the feature called Fuerte allowed you to be considered a certain creature size for the purposes of grappling and shoving. So as you leveled in Luchador, at certain levels you would be considered large, you would be considered huge, and gargantuan. But yeah, the whole idea is that you're such a good Luchador, you can wrestle giants and dragons and all these big monsters as you got stronger. So Fuerte was completely reworked and also moved to level 17. But the creature size trait ability that Fuerte had is still in the Luchador and is now part of the core Lucha Libre feature, which is similar to the martial arts feature for the monk. Also, in my own play testing and running the class, it had issues with encounters that had them starting from a distance or farther than their actual movement speed. which eventually resulted in the Luchador losing Luchador in the first turn of combat. So they wouldn't even have the resources on their second turn to actually do anything, because they needed to spend their entire time moving, and which was super frustrating. I addressed this issue with a new feature called Athletic Action. This is inspired by Cunning Action from the Rogue. What Athletic Action will allow you to do is to use your bonus action to make an unarmed strike. Use the Influence Action, because we no longer have Smack Talk. The Influence Action does does something similar, or you use it to do a special jump that's very reminiscent of Harengon's jump. It's a special jump that still functions as a jump that is my way to give you a dash. Ultimately, with all these changes to its core kit, I wanted to ensure that its gameplay identity was intact. The player should feel like they're playing a fighting game when they're playing the Luchador. They should be chaining their unarmed strikes together like they're doing a combo, building up Luchadai to eventually, with the Luchadai gaining, feeling like they're building their special attack meter, and then they spend that attack meter, they spend their Luchadai to do a special move, like a super move. I will say the changes were successful. Generating and spending Luchadai is a smoother experience, leading to faster gameplay. How did the Luchador perform in the first encounter? So the Luchador was able to single out a ghoul and bully it. Like that, it did what it was supposed to do. There was about nine of them in play for this main fight. So what the party ended up doing, they were bumbling through the initial throne room area of this dungeon, encountered one ghoul, allowed the ghoul to wail, and boom, it summoned all the other ghouls. Every ghoul that was in the dungeon immediately flooded into that single room. 9 ghouls. The Luchador was able to single out and bully one. They were mainly focused on bullying the ghouls that were attempting to hit the spellcasters. When it comes to the boss fight, though, Luchador should excel in single creature boss fights, unless that enemy is immune to the grapple and prone conditions, like the Banshee was. The Luchador playtester, my buddy, had to get creative and focus on his pure damage output and being a damage sponge. So he did the other role a Luchador can do, which is being a frontline tank. What he also did in order to up his damage output, he focused on signature moves that did just that just straight up said your unarmed strikes do more damage, especially since the Banshees are resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing at the same time. So in a situation where he effectively should have just been shut out, he wasn't. He also, since he was an ASMR, he found ways in his species kit to start adding in radiant damage into his ability, so that he can still push out damage. I was totally expecting, after I looked at the Banshee, I'm like, oh man, like this is gonna feel really bad in this fight. No. I think as a player, you want to be able to do the cool thing and always be able to do the cool thing. It is very much a single player mindset, because single player games in general don't try to put that level of limitation on you. You're still allowed to do the cool thing, but you'll have hindrances, and you have to find other ways to do the thing that they want you to do. I think a lot of players approach D&D that way, but D&D is ultimately a cooperative game. In this situation, the Luchador couldn't shine. What that means, you still have the cleric and you still have the warlock there, and you have the puppeteer. This is their combat now. Like, this is where they can shine. This is where they're able to set up and do stuff to allow the Luchador and the Scourge to kind of like position themselves in a way that they're still effective. But the other 3 classes that are there, spellcaster classes, now need to figure out, now they get to take the front lead and really dominate this fight, or find ways to enable the Scourge and the Luchador to do stuff. Overall, I was very, very happy with how the Luchador tested. It did really, really well, even in the face of an enemy that should have shut it down. It still had enough gas in the tank to be able to do its thing. Now onto the Scourge. The Scourge, like I said, is a class inspired by anti-heroes and the Dark Knight trope from various movies, comics, and video games. Like the Luchador, it approaches 5th edition differently. While the Luchador generates its resources, the Scourge is resourceless in its main kit. I guess the Rogue is its closest similarity in terms of being resourceless in its core kit. What my specific goal with seeing the playtest of this class is ensure that the features that it has, which is Strike Fear, which is its main feature, and then also Aura of Dread, which combos off of Strike Fear, are not disrupted to the table play, given that the class's features don't consume resources. The Scourge performed exactly how I expected to perform. It worked exactly how I wanted it to work. So Strike Fear is the Scourge's bonus action option. It is designed to enable the class to be the frontline debuffer. A creature must succeed on a wisdom saving throw. If not, they are frightened of the Scourge. And if you successfully hit the creature prior to using Strike Fear, that creature has disadvantage on that saving throw against Strike Fear. In isolation, this not being tied to a resource seemed okay, since it's resources, you can constantly spam it. But my concern really came down to when it's paired with Aura Dead trait from the Dreadnought feature. It may feel too strong since there's no resource tied to it. Aura Dread says any creature within a 10-foot emanation originating from the Scourge that becomes frightened by it has their movement reduced to 0. What also excited me was that the person playing the Scourge is a buddy in my play group who has a really strong mechanical understanding of 5th edition. By all considerations, is a min-maxer. It's not intentionally that he tries to min-max, but he does like to look for efficiency in accomplishing what his character is meant to do. He's one of our strongest mechanical players at the table, and normally is the guy we buff to the frustrations of our DM that normally runs our games. We buff the hell out of him because he's going to be the most effective at doing certain things. So yeah, he tends to optimize his character. So what I wanted to see was in this class in the hands of somebody that really will stretch the limits of the class. At that point, will it become overbearing? Will it become disruptive? Will it feel bad to play with and against? The way he approached playing the Scourge was that he showed it up with a Scourge that had a glaive, so he had the reach, so he can maximize the distance that he can keep somebody locked down with Strike Fear. And then he also had the green flame blade cantrip so that he can spread damage out. And the first combat, he and the Luchador did exactly what they're intended to do. They're supposed to sit there and lock down and control enemies, but not necessarily meant to just like eke out damage. They're there to be combat controllers. And the thing is, they work really well together, especially since they were taking on 9 ghouls. The Scourge player was able to keep 2 ghouls locked down. So even though we had 9, there was at least 3 ghouls that couldn't really push through, because he was also playing the Black Order subclass, which allows you to target an additional creature with Strike Fear. Even with his subclass choices, his ability to have reach, he only was able to keep down 2. It really did highlight how well it can do in like fights that there's a lot of enemies. I think the Scourge has the potential to be really, really strong in single target fights, similar to the Luchador. So that is something to really look at as a DM, like, okay, it might be too strong in those fights. But that brings me back to the Banshee. The Banshee is completely immune to the frightened condition. So my fear is that the Scourge, just like the Luchador, was going to be completely shut out of this fight. They were not going to be doing anything since they had the immunity, and its entire class kit and subclass kit relied on the class being able to frighten a creature. They were still effective. They did, they played it safe. They still kept it at range. They were using their glaive, and they just focused on dealing a lot of damage. That's all they wanted to do, is just try to hit this thing to whittle it down, because ultimately, it was about just standing in a position that would provoke attack of opportunity if the Banshee would move in its direction. At the same time, focus firing, since you're only fighting a single enemy, so everybody hitting that enemy at once is going to be a lot more effective than attempting to just try to frighten it. But ultimately, this wasn't their fight to shine in. This was the fight for the other 3 players in the game. I'm really happy with how these classes played. They feel in a really good place. I feel like I can move into the next step. They do exactly what I want them to do. They fill in fantasy tropes, not in or not exemplified in 5th edition. They're not really doubled down on in 5th edition, while also not feeling they're competing to do the same thing other classes are doing. They both allow other classes to still play their role. So yeah, so again, I'm happy with where these classes are going. We also play tested a Puppeteer. I'm going to talk about the Puppeteer at a different time. We'll do some design streams for the Puppeteer. But what's next for the Luchador and the Scourge? We're going to go into final editing. We're just going to clean everything up, finally nail down certain wording, make sure that it aligns with the new 2024 5th edition verbiage. We're going to finish commissioning art. And then after that, it's release. My expectation to get the Luchador and the Scourge out is going to be late spring or sometime in the summer. The Luchador playtest is up on Patreon. Scourge is soon to follow. If not, you can join the Discord. Both of the playtests are available on the Discord.